Unsteady Alfred likely to hit Brisbane as we keep watching this storm closely. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical weather bulletin for March the 3rd. So we're still watching that storm very closely off the coast of Queensland, Australia. Moving off slowly southeasterly right now is Cyclone Alfred, but it is expected by the massive weight of all the models to recurve back into land. Whether there's still much of it left by that point or not remains the big leading question. Looking around the world in the Atlantic, it's 90 days until hurricane season begins, and there's no warnings in effect, obviously, because there are no storms. There's a big frontal system moving off there, heading over the western and towards the central Atlantic at this time, but in general, the Atlantic is quiet. In the Eastern Pacific, it's just 74 days to go, and there's a bit of a satellite outage there, so we can't see very much going on, but quite a bit of cloud cover further north to the northeast of Hawaii. Well, in the Western Pacific, it's also still pretty quiet, although there's a decent looking disturbance there off the coast of the Philippines out towards the east. They do tend to flare up and then they dissolve as they move over land, probably going to be producing a fair bit of rain there. In the North Indian Ocean, things are looking relatively quiet as well. The ghost of a system going on there in the Arabian Sea today. But in general, rainfall isn't particularly strong, except for perhaps the southeastern side of Sri Lanka from a few thunderstorms. So in the southern hemisphere, it's still somewhat of a hub of activity because not only do we still have Hyundai active off the coast of Madagascar, but now two systems filling the void behind this recent passage. 40% and 50% now, two medium chance systems there that may be providing more activity in the southern Indian Ocean next week. And a gale advisory in effect from Gladstone to Gold Coast, Queensland from Alfred. It's not a cyclone warning at this point, but that could be coming up in the next few days. Still a wait and see on Alfred as it lingers just off the coast of Queensland there. Well, here it is, a close-up of it right now, 378 kilometres from the closest point of land, that's Moreton Island. 389 from Kagari, 407 from the Sunshine Coast, 428 from the Gold Coast, and 537 from Toowoomba. And of course, Brisbane sandwiched in between all of that as well, probably about 420 kilometres-ish from the centre of the storm. It will be drawing a little bit further to the southeast before turning west again and slamming into that region. It could still have some power. Let's take a look at an assortment of satellite imagery. First of all, looking obviously at Alfred and its progress. You can generally see that movement there, gradually southeasterly, which is throwing most of the heaviest of the rainfall away from the coast at this time. It is also partially exposed at this point. It is possibly succumbing to a lot of dry air intrusion, especially on that northwestern side. And not a huge amount of convection near the centre either, because the temperatures, the sea surface temperatures around it, are also very marginal. The big question here, and the big thing that will define what's left of this storm's track, is how long it will persist offshore before propelling itself back westwards, because the quicker it actually moves westwards, the more chance it has of remaining more powerful, because the warmer sea surface temperatures are just off the coast of Brisbane, and if it does move further towards the southeast like this, well, there is the possibility that the storm could actually wind down completely before it actually turns back towards the west. So that's something to look at there for potential scenarios. As we switch to the radar imagery, you saw that water vapor imagery before there as well. Massive amounts of dry air off to the northwestern side, which in itself could kill this thing off before it gets there. But we'll see what happens. It could blow back up again. Now this is Hyundai there, which is off the southern coast of Madagascar. It has been for several days now. It still had a good core this time yesterday, but it did lose it. And now it really is struggling, only blowing up a few more puffs of heavy convection position there near the center. It is going to turn more quickly towards the south now and eventually move down towards the southeast, following somewhere in the rough direction of what we once had Cyclone Alfred. A little bit of convection there, mostly offshore, so really the threat to land now is pretty minimal. It is only going to get further away, and most, if not all, of the rainfall has now occurred on land. Well, still holding up winds probably of about 60 miles per hour though for the time being, but we do expect that to gradually decrease, or maybe not actually. If it does turn post-tropical soon, there could still be a little bit of a bump back upwards again on its extratropical phase. Well, looking around the world off the US East Coast, you can still see a lot of that low-level cloud off the coast of the United States, and a little front there, a big string of clouds passing by Bermuda. Eastern Pacific, a few little clouds here and there that are blowing up there, moving northwards, quite a lot of shear in the region by the looks of things. Intertropical convergence zone throwing up a few thunderstorms. Western Pacific has that little disturbance there, which does look quite interesting on the face of it, although really nothing being supported that's going to become anything at all, but some rainfall for the Philippines, and similarly for the southern part of Sri Lanka today, and maybe the very southern tip of India, a few storm clouds. Here's the Mozambique channel, and you can just about see Hyundai off to the very bottom of the image there. Some of its remnant bands throwing themselves up through central Madagascar there, and even influencing the weather in parts of central Mozambique into Zimbabwe as well, moving on towards the west. But in general, a quiet scene. Here's the full picture of the southwest Indian Ocean. A few little disturbances out towards the northeast there as well. Not sure if that's our invest yet, but it could well be. Here's the Australian region starting to get first light across Australia this morning, and you can clearly see Alfred lingering off towards the right hand side. Elsewhere in the basin, pretty quiet. Frontal system there slowly trickling towards the southwestern part of Western Australia, and significant storms there just off the Cape York Peninsula as well, southern tip, southern coastline of Papua New Guinea and the western part of the island, easternmost Indonesia. Here's a look at the South Pacific, a few little things going on there as well, but nothing of any real note. Well, let's take a look at sea surface temperatures. The Atlantic still holding near their minimums of this time of year, around about 26 degrees Celsius, holding up through the southernmost of the Turks and Caicos Islands. Western Pacific building back up slowly as well. Western side of the Philippines looking quite good actually. Eastern side too, the further out to sea you go, is looking decent, 28 to 30 degrees Celsius near Palau. Southwest Indian Ocean still has quite a lot of energy as well, particularly further out to sea where that next invest could develop. Also a big pocket there off the western coast of Madagascar near 30 degrees. Western Australia around the top end into the Gulf of Carpentaria also looking exquisite really in terms of sea surface temperatures. Still huge amounts of energy to be taken upon there. And of course for Alfred, it's riding that line of 26 degrees Celsius right now. You can clearly see the cold trail behind it actually when we look at the anomalies. You can also see a small cold pool behind what was Cyclone Alfred as well before it hit Reunion, and also Hyundai's little cool trail too near Madagascar, Mozambique. In general though, it is above average across the tropics. A little cool pool there in the central Pacific, but warming up towards the eastern side near the Galapagos, possibly the harbinger of a new El Nino phase. Oceanic heat content still looking pretty decent in parts of the Western Pacific. It just needs a few tropical cyclones to actually take advantage of that. So none of those in sight yet. Even 1-2 spots in the East Pac there. And in the Southern Pacific, obviously that big line of huge amounts of energy in the very deep tropics. A little bit further south though, we have moderate amounts. Alfred not really going to be helped very much by this setup because it is too far south to really get that OHC. So this is the GFS computer model for the next 5 days, where you can still see both cyclones, Hyundai and ex-cyclone Alfred, moving offshot towards the southeast, and then making way for those two new systems at the very top there. That's within the 5-day period. GFS having both of those systems near hurricane equivalent strength by the end of day 5, as a matter of fact. One of the more aggressive models at this early stage, but that could be a new, potentially big cyclone heading towards the northern tip of Madagascar right there. And this is Alfred. GFS a lot more hopeful than what the satellite appearance is showing, holding close to hurricane equivalent strength. That's at least category 2 Australian scale, all the way towards landfall north of Brisbane, north of the Sunshine Coast, and then moving inland towards the west. Models varying a little bit on this, but really there is some pretty good agreement about this landfall happening somewhere between probably just north of the Sunshine Coast down to Brisbane, or maybe even a little bit further south than that. What's really going to be the main issue with this storm, most likely, apart from widespread winds if it does reach its potential, but assuming it doesn't quite do that, it's rainfall. Regardless of what happens with the storm's appearance, it is going to be a big rainmaker. It will probably start churning up more convection when it gets close to land, and look at these rain totals getting up towards 16 plus inches in the Brisbane metro region. Really 400 millimeters possible in that zone, and also extending down to the northeastern tip of New South Wales. Well, looking at the longer range, day 5 through 10, you can see both of these systems in the South Indian Ocean getting rather mature. The first one moving through Madagascar and then into the Mozambique Channel, and really strengthening there and blowing up quite a bit. Let's zoom in on that one as the other system goes harmlessly out to sea as a probably category 1 or 2 Saffir-Simpson scale. But we have this one here really filling out on the 12th or 13th of March as it opens into more open water in what I mentioned before, those really warm sea surface temperatures off the western coast of Madagascar. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Forster Team merch store where you can take a look at everything we've got. And a reminder that this is Tropical Weather Bulletin number 999. Wow, we're nearly at the big 1K. Well, in the Scilly range, that's day 10 to 16, looking at both systems again there. Nice track on that eastern system. It does spend quite a bit of time out there before dying off, but then look at the big cyclone on the left-hand side in the Mozambique Channel, really holding a lot of intensity. That is probably a major hurricane equivalent landfall there in Mozambique, north of Beira, I think we are here. Am I in the right place? I think so. Moving off towards west-northwesterly movement, and then moving inland. Massive that cyclone if it does happen, which is obviously a very, very big if at that long range. Well, on this day, it was one of my favourite parades, the early period of March 1992. Late February, early March had tons of storms in this area. Indeed, if I'm thinking about the right season, there was a period in late February where there were 8 new named storms in a 4-day period. But at this point, we had 2 Category 3s active at the same time, Harriet Heather and Esau, either side of Australia, and 2 tropical storms, Farida and Ian. Of course, Ian was a really strong storm as well, very compact as well, which had just made landfall in Western Australia, weakened to a TS by this point. Well, back to today, we are code yellow, slight downgrade, but still something to watch definitely with Alfred. In the Atlantic, the first name this year will be Andrea. In the Eastern Pacific, it will be Alvin, and in the Central Pacific, it's Iona. We're still stuck at 18 storms so far around the world, but we're not complaining. The Western Pacific's next name is Wu-Tip. The North Indian Ocean will be Shakti, of course the Northern Hemisphere, yet to get off the grid. Not that uncommon still for this time of year. In the Australian region, the next name now is Courtney. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, it's Yvonne. And in the South Pacific, it's Tam. On that middle column, we might be seeing some more names soon based on that model run. We'll see you for 1000 tomorrow. Have a good night.
Become an Ultimate Fan today.